On an afternoon charged with tension, a racist waitress hurls thoughtless insults at Shaquille O'Neal, unaware that the giant was not only present, but also the owner of the restaurant. The unexpected revelation turns the incident into a stunning twist that leaves everyone speechless. The sound of breaking glass shattered the quiet of the starlit night. "Dr. Morgan, please, you need to step away from the edge." Ellie's voice wavered as she inched forward on the observatory roof. 20 stories below. The city lights of Boston winked indifferently. Between them stretched 15 feet of rain-slicked concrete, and at its edge stood Marcus Morgan, brilliant astrophysicist, her mentor, her friend, now balanced precariously between existence and oblivion. "They're coming back tomorrow," Marcus whispered, his voice eerily calm as he stared upward. The telescope dome loomed behind him, its silver surface reflecting moonlight in broken fragments. "The signals, Ellie. They're not random. They're trying to tell us something." The autumn. Wind whipped around them, carrying the scent of rain and the distant rumble of thunder. Lightning briefly illuminated Marcus's face, gaunt, unshaven, eyes fever-bright with something beyond exhaustion. "I know," Ellie said, trying to keep her voice steady despite the panic clawing at her throat. "That's why we need you. To help us understand them." Marcus laughed, the sound hollow and fractured. "They took everything from me to silence me. My credibility, my funding, my family." He held up a trembling hand, fingers splayed against the night sky as if trying to catch starlight. "But I can hear them, even now." From the stairwell door, Dr. Chen from Psychiatric Services made eye contact with Ellie and gave a small nod. The campus security officers flanking him waited for her signal. "Your daughter needs you, Marcus," Ellie said, taking another careful step forward. The roof gravel crunched beneath her shoes. "Maya's waiting at home. Remember how you promised to show her Saturn's rings this weekend." For a moment, something shifted in Marcus's expression, a flash of the man she'd known for 8 years, the brilliant professor who'd mentored her through her dissertation, the father who kept a crayon drawing of a rainbow-colored galaxy taped inside his office desk. Then his face hardened. "You're lying. Rebecca took her. They're in California now." In her pocket, Ellie's phone vibrated. The text from Rebecca Morgan glowed in the darkness. "We just landed. On our way to the university. Keep him talking." "Marcus," Ellie said, taking another step closer, "whatever you think you heard in those radio signals, it wasn't what I thought I heard." The sudden fury in his voice made her freeze. "It's what I know is there. The pattern repeats every 67 seconds. It's a language, Ellie. They've been trying to contact us for years, and everyone is too blind to see it." Behind her, Dr. Chen signaled the security team to hold position. One wrong move now could be catastrophic. "Then help me see it," Ellie pleaded, genuine desperation in her voice. "You've always said science is about sharing knowledge, so share this with me, with all of us." Marcus's shoulders slumped slightly. For the first time, he looked away from the sky and directly at her. "You really want to know?" Ellie nodded, her heart hammering in her chest. "I do." Marcus took a half step away from the edge. "It started 6 months ago when we detected that anomalous signal from HD W164595. 6 months earlier, the astronomy department at Boston University had been buzzing with excitement. Their new radio telescope array had just come online, and Marcus Morgan had been given priority access for his SETI research project. At 52, Marcus was at the peak of his career, a tenured professor with a reputation for brilliance tinged with eccentricity. Ellie Chen, 34, had been his postdoctoral researcher for 2 years, drawn to his unorthodox approaches and genuine passion for the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. Where others in the field had grown cynical or cautious, Marcus remained an optimist, convinced that humanity was not alone in the cosmos. "The problem with SETI," he'd told her once while they calibrated equipment on a frigid January night, "isn't that we're looking in the wrong places. It's that we're listening with the wrong expectations. We're waiting for something that sounds like us." Marcus's home life had seemed as orderly as his methodical research. His wife, Rebecca, an environmental lawyer, managed their household with the same precision she brought to her cases. Their daughter Maya, 12, had inherited her father's curiosity about the stars and her mother's sharp analytical mind. The first cracks had appeared in early spring. "I'm hearing something unusual in the data," Marcus had mentioned casually during a department meeting. "A repeating pattern that doesn't match any known celestial phenomenon." His colleagues had nodded politely but moved on to budget concerns and teaching assignments. Only Ellie had stayed after, asking to see his findings. "It's faint," he'd admitted, pulling up spectrograms on his computer, "but it's there, every 67 seconds like clockwork." What had started as scientific curiosity soon consumed him. Marcus began spending nights at the observatory, cancelling classes to analyze data. Dark circles formed under his eyes, and his typically meticulous notes became scrawled equations and strange diagrams. The turning point came during the department's annual spring symposium. Marcus had been scheduled to present his regular research on binary star systems. Instead, he hijacked his time slot to present what he called evidence of non-human intelligence attempting contact. The room had fallen silent as he played audio recordings, transformed radio signals that sounded like nothing more than static to everyone else. When the department chair tried to intervene, Marcus had become agitated, accusing colleagues of willful ignorance and institutional cowardice. "Listen," he'd shouted, increasing the volume until feedback screeched through the speakers. "It's right there, how can you not hear it?" The video of his meltdown had gone viral in academic circles. Within weeks, his research funding was temporarily reassigned. Colleagues began avoiding him in hallways. Students requested transfers from his classes. At home, the strain had become unbearable. Rebecca had watched her husband transform from a loving, if somewhat distracted partner, into someone she barely recognized. A man who covered their garage walls with printouts of signal data and spoke in fragmented sentences about them and the message. The final straw came when Maya found her father in the backyard at 3 in the morning, building a makeshift radio antenna out of household electronics and aluminum foil. When Rebecca suggested he take a leave of absence, Marcus had accused her of conspiring against him. "They got to you too," he'd whispered, his voice breaking, "just like they got to everyone else." 2 weeks ago, Rebecca had taken Maya to stay with her sister in California, hoping the distance might shock Marcus into seeking help. Instead, he'd retreated further, barricading himself in his university office, surviving on vending machine snacks and responding to emails with cryptic references to cosmic communications. Ellie had been the only person he still trusted. As his behavior grew more erratic, she'd contacted Dr. Victor Chen from the university's psychiatric services. Together, they developed a plan to intervene before Marcus could harm himself or his career beyond repair. But they'd underestimated the depths of his obsession. This morning, Marcus had sent Ellie a disturbing email. "They're coming back tomorrow. The signal will be clearest from the observatory roof. After tonight, everyone will understand. I'll finally have proof." When security reported that Marcus had somehow accessed the locked observatory and disabled the roof alarms, Ellie knew they were running out of time. "You were the only one who even tried to understand," Marcus said, now sitting on an air conditioning unit several feet from the roof's edge. The security officers had retreated inside, leaving only Ellie and Dr. Chen on the roof. The storm had intensified, rain falling in sheets around the covered portion where they huddled. Lightning illuminated the Boston skyline in sporadic flashes. "I did try," Ellie said, the guilt sharp in her chest. "But Marcus, I've reviewed all your data multiple times. The pattern you're seeing, it could be explained by equipment interference. Or confirmation bias." Marcus shook his head vehemently. "You're just like all the others, too afraid to acknowledge what's staring you in the face." Dr. Chen, who had been quietly observing, spoke for the first time. "Dr. Morgan, would you help me understand what exactly you believe these signals are communicating?" There was something in his gentle, genuine curiosity that seemed to reach Marcus. He ran a trembling hand through his rain-dampened hair. "It's mathematics at first, Prime numbers, the value of pi, basic universal constants. But underneath, his voice dropped to a whisper. There's a warning. A warning about what? Ellie asked. Something coming. Something that's happened before, in cycles. The last time was the Cretaceous-Paleogene extinction event. His eyes locked onto hers with unsettling intensity. They're trying to help us, but we're running out of time. Ellie's phone vibrated again. Rebecca and Maya had arrived at the university and were being escorted to the building by campus security. 15 minutes, maybe less. Marcus, Dr. Chen said, his voice calm and measured, I believe that you believe this is happening. Your experience is real to you. But there's a possibility that your mind is making connections that aren't objectively there. You think I'm delusional. It wasn't a question. I think, Dr. Chen continued carefully, that the human brain is wired to find patterns. It's how we survived as a species. Sometimes, especially under stress or exhaustion, our pattern recognition systems go into overdrive. Thunder crashed overhead, and for a moment, the only sound was rain drumming against the telescope dome. 6 months without proper sleep, Ellie added softly. Working 18-hour days. When was the last time you ate a real meal, Marcus? Something flickered in his eyes. Uncertainty, perhaps. That's irrelevant to the data. It's not, though, Ellie pressed. Your brain needs rest to function properly, to separate signal from noise. Marcus stood suddenly, pacing in the small covered area. You don't understand the pressure, the responsibility. If I'm right, if they're really trying to warn us, then ignoring this could mean the end of everything. And if you're wrong, Dr. Chen asked gently, then I've thrown away my career, my reputation. His voice cracked. My family. Ellie moved closer, close enough now to see the fine tremors in his hands, the raw redness of his sleepless eyes. Maya asked about you yesterday, she said, the truth of it reflected in her voice. She wanted to know when you'd be better, when her dad would come back. Marcus pressed his palms against his eyes. Rebecca will never forgive me. You don't know that, Ellie said. People forgive, especially people who love each other. The roof access door opened, and Rebecca Morgan stepped into the rain. Behind her, sheltered in the doorway, stood Maya, her eyes wide with fear and hope. Marcus, Rebecca called, her voice carrying over the storm. He turned, disbelief washing over his face. You're in California, he said weakly. We came back, Rebecca replied, rain plastering her dark hair against her face. Maya didn't want to leave without saying goodbye to the stars. Or to you. Maya stepped forward, clutching something in her hands, the crayon drawing of the rainbow galaxy now laminated and preserved. Dad, she said, her voice small against the vastness of the night sky. Are you still in there? For a long moment, Marcus stood frozen. Then, like a marionette whose strings had been cut, he sank to his knees on the wet concrete. I heard something in the noise, he whispered, shoulders shaking. I really heard something. Rebecca moved to him, kneeling beside him despite the rain. I know you did, she said, taking his hands in hers. But we need to make sure you're okay before you can figure out what it means. Dr. Chen approached carefully. Dr. Morgan, I'd like to help you get the rest you need. Then, when you're ready, we can look at your data together, with fresh eyes. The signal, Marcus said, urgency returning to his voice. It's coming back. Tomorrow, I need to be here. I'll monitor it, Ellie promised. Every second, I'll record everything, analyze everything, but you need to rest first. Maya moved forward, placing the laminated drawing in her father's hands. You always told me that real scientists take care of their brains, she said, wisdom beyond her years in her solemn face. That's why you made me go to bed, even when I wanted to stay up and watch meteor showers. A ghost of a smile touched Marcus's lips. I did say that, didn't I? Rebecca helped him to his feet. Just a few days of rest, of treatment, then we'll face whatever's out there, or in here, together. She touched his temple gently. Marcus looked from his wife to his daughter, then to Ellie and Dr. Chen. The frantic energy that had animated him seemed to drain away, leaving only exhaustion in its wake. "Okay," he said finally. "Okay." That's all. They moved toward the door. Marcus paused, looking back at the telescope dome. "But if I'm right, Ellie..." "I'll be listening," she promised, day and night. 3 weeks later, Ellie sat alone in the university's main observatory. Outside, the first snow of winter dusted the campus grounds. Inside, screens displayed real-time data from the radio telescope array, monitoring the coordinates Marcus had specified. After that night on the roof, Marcus had agreed to enter an inpatient treatment program at Massachusetts General Hospital. The official diagnosis was psychosis due to extreme sleep deprivation and stress, possibly triggered by an underlying vulnerability to bipolar disorder. With medication, therapy, and, most importantly, rest, he had slowly begun to reconnect with reality. Ellie had kept her promise. Every day, she monitored the signal frequencies Marcus had identified, recording everything and analyzing the data with fresh algorithms. So far, she'd found nothing but the random noise of distant stars and cosmic background radiation, until tonight. The pattern appeared just after midnight, a repeating sequence that stood out from the background noise. Exactly. Every 67 seconds, just as Marcus had described. Ellie's heart raced as she ran the verification protocols, eliminating possible terrestrial interference, equipment malfunction, and statistical anomalies. The pattern remained. With trembling fingers, she reached for her phone to call Marcus, then stopped. He was healing, rebuilding his relationship with his family, and gradually returning to his research under carefully managed conditions. What would this do to him? Would it trigger another episode, or vindicate his most destructive behaviors? The ethical dilemma twisted in her chest as she stared at the undeniable evidence on her screen. Science demanded transparency. Friendship demanded caution. The observatory door opened, startling her. "I knew you'd still be here," Marcus said, stepping inside. He looked transformed, rested, clear-eyed, his formerly gaunt face filling out again. Dr. Chen stood behind him, along with Rebecca. "Marcus," Ellie stammered, instinctively moving to block the screen. "I didn't expect you tonight." "It's okay," he said with a soft smile. "I'm not here because of the signals." "We thought it might be good for Marcus to reconnect with his work environment in a controlled way," Dr. Chen explained, "part of his reintegration therapy." Rebecca squeezed her husband's hand. Small steps. Marcus walked around the observatory, touching equipment with familiar affection. "I missed this place. The quiet, the perspective." He looked up at the domed ceiling. "Mind if I take a look at what you're working on?" Ellie hesitated, glancing at Dr. Chen, who gave a subtle nod. "Actually," she said carefully, "I've been monitoring the coordinates you identified." Something flashed in Marcus's eyes, not the feverish obsession of before, but scientific curiosity. "And?" She stepped aside, revealing the display. "There is a pattern, Marcus. You were right about that part." He approached slowly, as if afraid the screen might vanish if he moved too quickly. Rebecca tensed, but Dr. Chen placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "See 7 seconds," Marcus whispered, watching the pattern repeat. "Just like I said." "Yes," Ellie acknowledged, "but I've identified the source. It's not what you thought." She pulled up another screen showing a pulsar, a rotating neutron star, newly discovered in the region Marcus had been observing. "It's PSR J1921+2153, she explained. "A pulsar with a highly unusual rotation rate and magnetic field configuration that creates this distinctive pattern." She pulled up comparison data. The mathematics in the signal, the prime numbers, the constants, they're artifacts of the pulsar's rotation interacting with surrounding gas clouds. Marcus stared at the data, his scientific mind processing what his illness had once distorted. "Not aliens," he said finally. "Just extraordinary physics." "Still a major discovery," Ellie said. "Something no one has documented before. Something that could rewrite our understanding of neutron star formation." Marcus sat heavily in the observatory chair, his eyes never leaving the screen. I was wrong. And right at the same time. Dr. Chen nodded. The brain is remarkably good at finding real patterns. Sometimes it just needs help interpreting what those patterns mean. Are you disappointed? Rebecca asked softly, moving to her husband's side. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, watching the signal pulse with its perfect 67-second rhythm. Then, surprisingly, he smiled. No, he said, looking up at his wife. I'm relieved. The tension in the room dissipated as Marcus turned back to the data with clear eyes. The interaction between the magnetic field and the surrounding molecular cloud, it's unprecedented. We need to calculate the field strength, model the rotation dynamics. He paused, sudden vulnerability replacing scientific excitement. If I'm allowed to be part of the research team. Marcus, Ellie said firmly, it's your discovery. Unusual methodology aside, you found something real that everyone else missed. I've already credited you in the preliminary findings. 4. The first time in months, Marcus Morgan laughed, a genuine sound of joy rather than mania. Science at its best, he said, being wrong in exactly the right way. Spring came to Boston University with cherry blossoms and renewal. On a warm April afternoon, Marcus stood at a podium in the packed lecture hall, presenting the findings. On PSR J1921 Plow 2153, now colloquially known in astronomical circles as Morgan's pulsar, the universe speaks in patterns, he told the audience, his voice strong and steady. Our job as scientists is not just to listen, but to understand the difference between what we hope to hear and what's actually being said. In the front row, Rebecca and Maya watched with pride. Beside them sat Ellie, who had co-authored the groundbreaking paper with her mentor, and Dr. Chen, whose psychiatric insights had been acknowledged in the EC methodology section, a rare bridge between astronomy and neuroscience. After the applause and questions, after the congratulations from colleagues who had once avoided eye contact in hallways, Marcus found a quiet moment with his family on the campus green. There's something I want to show you, he said, leading them to a small telescope set up near the science building. Maya's been asking about Saturn's rings. Tonight's perfect for viewing. As twilight deepened into night, stars emerged overhead. Marcus showed his daughter how to focus the telescope, his hands steady on hers as they turned the dials together. Dad, Maya asked quietly, as they waited for Saturn to rise higher in the sky, do you ever still listen for the aliens? Marcus smiled, meeting Rebecca's eyes over their daughter's head. I listen to what's really there, he said, and that's wonderful enough. As Saturn's magnificent rings came into view, 4 people huddled around a small telescope, a constellation of their own, finding their way back to each other beneath the vast, silent stars.